understanding the simple laws of life. Watch narrowly the demonstration of a truth, its birth, and you trace back the effluence to its spring and source within us. Browning. More is the treasure of law than gems, sweeter than comb its sweetness, its delights, delightful past compare. The Light of Asia. Walking those byways which I have so far pointed out, resting in their beauty and drinking in their blessedness, the pilgrim along life's broad highway will in due time come to one wherein his last burden will fall from him, where all his weariness will pass away, where he will drink of light-hearted liberty and rest in perpetual peace. And this most blessed of spiritual byways, the richest source of strength and comfort, I call the right understanding of the simple laws of life. He who comes to it leaves behind all lack and longing, all doubt and perplexity, all sorrow and uncertainty. He lives in the fullness of satisfaction, in light and knowledge, in gladness and surety. He who comprehends the utter simplicity of life, who obeys its laws and does not step aside into the dark paths and complex mazes of selfish desire, stands where no harm can reach him, where no enemy can lay him low, and he doubts, desires, and sorrows no more. Doubt ends where reality begins. Painful desire ceases where the fullness of joy is perpetual and complete. And when the unfailing and eternal good is realized, what room is there for sorrow? Human life, when rightly lived, is simple with a beautiful simplicity, but it is not rightly lived while it is bound to a complexity of lusts, desires, and wants. These are not the real life, but the burning fever and painful disease which originate in an unenlightened condition of mind. The curtailing of one's desires is the beginning of wisdom. Their entire mastery is its consummation. This is so because life is bounded by law, and being inseparable from law, life has no need that is not already supplied. Now lust or desire is not need, but a rebellious superfluity, and as such it leads to deprivation and misery. The prodigal son, while in his father's house, not only had all he required, but was surrounded by superabundance. Desire was not necessary, because all things were at hand. But when desire entered his heart, he went into a far country, and began to be in want. And it was only when he became reduced to the utmost extremity of starvation that he turned with longing towards his father's home. This parable is symbolical of the evolution of the individual and the race. Man has come into such a complexity of cravings that he lives in continual discomfort, dissatisfaction, want, and pain, and his only cure lies in a return to the Father's home, that is, to actual living or being, as distinguished from desiring. But a man does not do this until he is reduced to the last extremity of spiritual starvation. He has then reaped the experience of pain and sorrow as the result of desire, and looks back with longing towards the true life of peace and plenty. And so he turns round, and begins his toilsome journey back towards home, towards that rich life of simple being, wherein is emancipation from the thraldom and fever and hunger of desire. And this longing for the true life, for truth, reality, should not be confounded with desire. It is an aspiration. Desire is the craving for possession. Aspiration is the hunger of the heart for peace. The craving for things leads ever farther and farther from peace, and not only ends in deprivation, but is, in itself, a state of perpetual want. Until it comes to an end rest, satisfaction is an impossibility. The hunger for things can never be satisfied, but the hunger for peace can, and the satisfaction of peace is found, and fully possessed, when all selfish desire is abandoned. Then there is a fullness of joy, abounding plenty, and rich and complete blessedness. In this supremely blessed state, life is comprehended in its perfect symmetry and simplicity, and the acme of power and usefulness is attained. Then even the hunger for peace ceases, for peace becomes the normal condition, is fully possessed, constant and never varying, Men, immersed in desire, ignorantly imagine that the conquest of desire leads to inactivity, loss of power, and lifelessness. Instead, it leads to highly concentrated activity, to the full employment of power, and to a life so rich, so glorious, and so abundantly blessed as to be incomprehensible to those who hunger for pleasures and possessions. Of this life only can it be said, "Here are no sounds of discord, no profane or senseless gossip of unworthy things. Only the songs of chisels and of pens, of busy brushes and ecstatic strains, of souls surcharged with music most divine. Here is no idle sorrow, no poor grief, for any day or object left behind. For time is counted precious, and herein is such complete abandonment of self, that tears turn into rainbows, and enhance the beauty of the land where all is fair." When a man is rescued from selfish desire, his mind is unencumbered, and he is free to work for humanity, no longer racing after those gratifications which will leave him hungry still. All his powers are at his immediate command. Seeking no rewards, he can concentrate all his energies upon the faultless completion of his duties, and so accomplish all things and fulfill all righteousness. The fully enlightened and fully blessed man is not prompted to action by desire, but works from knowledge. The man of desire needs the promise of reward to urge him to action. He is a child working for the possession of a toy. But the man of knowledge, living in the fullness of life and power, can at any moment bring his energies into requisition for the accomplishment of that which is necessary. He is, spiritually, a full-grown man. For him all rewards have ceased. To him all occurrences are good. He lives always in complete satisfaction. Such a man has attained to life, and his delight, and it is a sweet, perpetual, and never-failing delight, is in obedience to the simple demands of exact and never-failing law. But this life of supreme blessedness is an end, and the pilgrim who is striving towards it, the prodigal returning to it, must travel hither, and employ means to get there. He must pass through the country of his animal desires, disentangling himself from their intricacies, simplifying them, overcoming them. This is the way, and he has no enemies but what spring within himself. At first the way seems hard because, blinded by desire, he does not perceive the simple structure of life, and its laws are hidden from him. But as he becomes more simple in his mind, the direct laws of life become unfolded to his spiritual perception, and at once the point is reached where these laws begin to be understood and obeyed. Then the way becomes plain and easy. There is no more uncertainty and darkness, but all is seen in the clear light of knowledge. It will help to accelerate the progress of the searcher for the true and blessed life if we now turn to a consideration of some of these simple laws, which are rigidly mathematical in their operations. The elementary laws never apologize. All life is one, though it has a diversity of manifestations. All law is one, but it is applicable and operative in a variety of ways. There is not one law for matter and another for mind, not one for the material and visible and another for the spiritual and invisible. There is the same law throughout. There is not one kind of logic for the world and another for the spirit, but the same logic is applicable to both. Men faithfully and with unerring worldly wisdom observe certain laws or rules of action in material things, knowing that to ignore or disobey them would be great folly on their part, ending in disaster for themselves and confusion for society and the state. But they err in supposing and believing that the same rules do not apply to spiritual things, and thereby suffer for their ignorance and disobedience. It is a law in worldly things that a man shall support himself, that he shall earn a living, and that he that will not work, neither shall he eat. Men observe this law, recognizing its justice and goodness, and so earn the necessary material sustenance. But in spiritual things, men, broadly speaking, deny and ignore the operation of this law. They think that, While it is absolutely just that a man should earn his material bread, and that the man who shirks this law should wander in rags and want, it is right that they should beg for their spiritual bread. Think it to be just that they should receive all spiritual blessings, without either deserving or attempting to earn them. The result is that most men wander in spiritual beggary and want, that is, in suffering and sorrow, deprived of spiritual sustenance, of joy and knowledge and peace. If you are in need of any worldly thing, food, clothing, furniture, or other necessity, you do not beg of the storekeeper to give it to you. You ask the price of it, pay for it with your money, and then it becomes your own. You recognize the perfect justice in giving an equivalent for what you receive, and would not wish it to be otherwise. The same just law prevails in spiritual things. If you are in need of any spiritual thing, joy, assurance, peace, or what else soever, you can only come into full possession of it by giving an equivalent. You must pay the price for it. As you must give a portion of your material substance for a worldly thing, so you must give a portion of your immaterial substance for a spiritual thing. You must yield up some passion or lust or vanity or indulgence before that spiritual possession can be yours. The miser who clings to his money and will not give up any of it because of the pleasure which its possession affords him cannot have any of the material comforts of life. He lives in continual want and discomfort in spite of all his wealth. The man who will not give up his passions, who clings to anger, unkindness, sensuality, pride, vanity, self-indulgence, for the momentary pleasure which their gratification affords him, is a spiritual miser. He cannot have any spiritual comforts, and suffers continual spiritual want and uneasiness in spite of the wealth of worldly pleasures which he fondly hugs and refuses to give up. The man who is wise in worldly things neither begs nor steals, but labors and purchases, and the world honors him for his uprightness. The man who is wise in spiritual things neither begs nor steals, but labors in his own inner world and purchases his spiritual possessions. Him the whole universe honors for his righteousness. It is another law in worldly things that a man who engages himself to another in any form of employment shall be content with the wages upon which he agreed. If at the end of his week's work and on receiving his wages, he were to ask his employer for a larger sum, pleading that, though he could not justly claim it and did not really deserve it, yet he expected it, he would not only not receive the larger sum, but would, doubtless, be discharged from his post. Yet in spiritual things men do not think it to be either foolish or selfish to ask for those blessings, spiritual wages, upon which they never agreed, for which they never labored, and which they do not deserve. Every man gets from the law of the universe that upon which he agrees and for which he works, no more, no less, and he is continually entering into agreements with the supreme law, the master of the universe. For every thought and act which he gives, he receives its just equivalent. For all work done in the form of deeds, he receives the wages due to him. Knowing this, the enlightened man is always content, always satisfied, and in perfect peace, knowing that whatever he receives, be it that men call misfortune or good fortune, he has earned. The great law never cheats any man of his just due, but it says to the railer and the complainer, "Friend, didst thou not agree with me for a penny a day?" Again, if a man would grow rich in worldly goods, he must economize and husband his financial resources until he has accumulated sufficient capital to invest in some branch of industry. Then he must judiciously invest his little store of capital, neither holding it too tightly nor letting it go carelessly. He thus increases both in worldly wisdom and worldly riches. The idle spendthrift cannot grow rich. He is wasteful and riotous. He who would grow rich in spiritual things must also economize and husband his mental resources. He must curb his tongue and his impulses, not wasting his energy in idle gossip, vain argument, or excesses of temper. In this way he will accumulate a little store of wisdom, which is his spiritual capital, and this he must send out into the world for the good of others, and the more he uses it, the richer he will become. Thus does a man increase in both heavenly wisdom and heavenly riches. The man who follows his blind impulses and desires, and does not control and govern his mind, is a spiritual spendthrift. He can never become rich in divine things. It is a physical law that if we would reach the summit of a mountain, we must climb thither. The path must be sought and then carefully followed, and the climber must not give up and go back because of the labor involved and the difficulties to be overcome, nor on account of aching climbs, otherwise his object cannot be accomplished. And this law is also spiritual. He who would reach the high altitudes of moral or intellectual grandeur must climb thither by his own efforts. He must seek out the pathway and then assiduously follow it, not giving up and turning back, but surmounting all difficulties and enduring for a time trials, temptations, and heartaches, and at last he will stand upon the glorious summit of moral perfection, the world of passion, temptation, and sorrow beneath his feet, and the boundless heavens of dignity stretching vast and silent above his head. If a man would reach a distant city, or any place of destination, he must travel. There is no law by which he can be instantly transported there. He can only get there by putting forth the necessary exertion. If he walks, he will put forth great exertion, but it will cost him nothing in money. If he drives or takes train, there will be less actual labor, but he must pay in money for which he has labored. To reach any place requires labor. This cannot be avoided. It is law. Equally so spiritually. He who would reach any spiritual destination, such as purity, compassion, wisdom, or peace, must travel and must labor to get there. There is no law by which he can suddenly be transported to any of these beautiful spiritual cities. He must find the most direct route and then put forth the necessary labor, and at last he will come to the end of his journey. These are but a few of the many laws, or manifestations, of the one great law, which are to be understood, applied, and obeyed before the full manhood and maturity of spiritual life and blessedness can be attained. There is no worldly or physical law which is not operative, with equal exactness, in the spiritual realm, that is, the inner and invisible world of man's beings. Just as physical things are the shadows and types of spiritual realities, so worldly wisdom is the reflected image of divine wisdom. All those simple operations of human life in worldly things which men never question, but follow and obey implicitly because of their obvious plainness and exactness, obtain in spiritual things with the same unerring accuracy. And when this is understood, and these laws are as implicitly obeyed in spiritual as in worldly matters, then has a man reached the firm standing ground of exact knowledge. His sorrows are at an end, and he can doubt no more. Life is involved, uncompromising justice. Its operations are simple, invincible logic. Law reigns forever, and the heart of law is love. Favoritism and caprice are the reverse of both law and love. The universe has no favorites. It is supremely just, and gives to every man his rightful earnings. All is good, because all his according to law, and because all his according to law, man can find the right way in life, and having found it, can rejoice and be glad. The Father of Jesus is the unfailing good which is embodied in the law of things. No evil can happen to a good man, either in life or death. Jesus recognized the good in his own faith, and exonerated all his persecutors from blame. No man, he declared, taketh my life from me, but I lay it down of myself. That is, he himself had brought about his own end. He who has, by simplifying his life and purifying his mind, arrived at an understanding of the beautiful simplicity of being, perceives the unvarying operation of law in all things, and knows the result of all his thoughts and deeds upon himself and the world, knows what effects are bound up with the mental causes which he sets in motion. He then thinks and does only those thoughts and deeds that are blessed in their inception, blessed in their growth, and blessed in their completion. Humbly accepting the lawful results of all the deeds done when in a state of ignorance, he neither complains, nor fears, nor questions, but is at rest in obedience, is perfectly blessed in his knowledge of the good law. The tissue of our life to be, we weave with colors all our own, and in the field of destiny we reap as we have sown. And if we reap as we have sown, and take the dole we deal, the law of pain is love alone, the wounding is to heal.